Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the first formal stakeholder feedback session around the Future Ready PA Index. My name is Brian Campbell. I'm the director of the Bureau of Curriculum, Assessment, and Instruction at the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and I'm the programmatic lead for the index. Joining me is Alan Muir, who is the department representative from PLS Third Learning, which is a corporation that develops and hosts many of PDE's web functions, and he is the technical lead for the project. The purpose here tonight is to get some feedback on the design, the look, the functionality of the Future Ready PA Index, which will be the new forward-facing state report for school accountability in Pennsylvania. This is the first formal session, and we're really excited that we can do it with this group of folks, with parents and community. It was very important to Secretary Rivera and Deputy Secretary Stem and to myself that we roll this out first to parents and community, because while this is a educational tool, the goal all along from the beginning of this project has been something that is transparent and easy to use and easy to read and meaningful to the community that the schools are in. I want to start by thanking a few folks: Jenna Monley out in Philadelphia in the eastern part of the state, Benita Allen in Pittsburgh, and James Fogarty in the western central part of the state for helping us get these invitations out and get the right folks around the table and a good group of parents and community leaders here tonight. And I do want to tell you all, I appreciate your involvement and your dedication to education in Pennsylvania and to your children and your relatives' education and your neighbors' education, for your interest in taking the time to join us and work through this with us. So I very much appreciate that. I'm going to start off with very brief background to give you some context so that you have a good, solid understanding of what the index is being designed to accomplish. And then from that point, we are going to share some actual screen stills of the index. And this is the first public reveal of some of these screenshots. So it's pretty exciting for you guys tonight to have the first public look at actual design. And then at the conclusion of the presentation, there will be a link. And we are going to ask all of you to take some time. It's a very brief feedback form, but we would ask you to take some time and go in and look at the feedback and give us that. In developing the ESSA plan and some other components of this project, we've had over 3,000 different individuals respond. And we want to do that with the index. We want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all our constituents and especially our parents and our community. So there'll be a link with some opportunity for you to give feedback on the look, the purpose, and the functionality of the website. So what is the Future Ready PA Index? Early in the administration, Governor Wolf charged the Department of Education with coming up with some new ways to look at school accountability. A previous website and a previous report that was known as the School Performance Profile was almost 80 to 85% reliant on standardized test scores, measuring either students' performance or students' growth on those scores. And Governor Wolf and Secretary Rivera and Deputy Secretary Stem and myself all feel that there's a lot more to school success, especially in relation to the way the school serves the community, than just standardized test scores. So the purpose of this tool is a more holistic look at school success. It's going to take measures year-long and really career-long from a student to really assess the school's output, more than standardized tests that are done, very short over a few number of weeks just at the end of the school year. We also want to look at a more comprehensive measure that values schools' efforts to help all students learn and grow. There are a lot of good things going on in schools in this state that we see every day as we're out visiting schools that can't be measured simply with a number on a test. And we want to make sure we reflect the good work that all our school partners are doing. So formally, in SPP, we looked at a aggregate score. In other words, the SPP was determined up into a single numeric value. And if you look, there are other rating systems of schools in other states or other entities not affiliated with PDE that will try to rate schools, and they'll do things like a letter grade from a school report card, A to F, or a number of stars, or different things like that. There are some things that we weren't necessarily happy about in the idea of rolling scores up into a single number. First off, we feel like that can place policy values on each indicator. In a system where a test score was about 85% of the formula, and then some things like AP tests and industry tests like NACDI and NIMS were about 15%, and some things like internships and school work experiences weren't factored in. That was sort of a de facto way of saying that testing was most important, AP and career prep was somewhat important, and work experience was not very important because of the weighting in the formula. We wanted to get away from that, and we wanted each indicator to stand alone so that the community can judge which ones they value more than others, or what kind of performance they expect in each individual indicator. There's also issues when you roll this into a math formula that sometimes higher performance on one indicator offsets lower performance on another. And the issue there, if you have really high test scores, but perhaps not a lot of career prep, that'll balance out when you do an average into an aggregate number. But career prep may be just as important or even more important depending on the community you're in. And that evidence gets hidden when we roll into a single rating. It may suggest or imply comparability when it does not exist. When you try to average those things, we had to turn everything into percents and order things in a way that it would fit in a math formula, when sometimes that wasn't the best way to measure that individual performance indicator. It often combines dissimilar measures, and it just oversimplifies subgroup performance and building configurations. In the SPP, we did not report out on individual subgroups of students. And again, that is a group that could get hidden or lost in an overall average. And we feel the community has the right to see how each individual group of students perform. And we think school leaders need to see that to make intelligent programmatic decisions when they're designing curriculum and designing programs of study. So here's an example really quickly. And we've taken out the name and the actual numerical values on this, but this is an actual example that would work if you ran it through the old SPP formula. So you have two high schools. And if we look at high school number 1, this school has very high scores in their keystones. And we said about 85% of that formula was tied to these scores. So obviously that's going to mean their growth is high, and they're going to have a certain aggregate number when we run it through the SPP math formula. High school number 2 also had high scores, but they had a higher score on the AP and IB exams, which is a good test of college readiness. And they also had more students that were actually advanced. Remember, proficiency measures the percentage of students who are both proficient or advanced. So it sort of tells you how far your school has gotten students over a line, but it really doesn't aggregate out this how far over that line they've gotten. When we ran these schools, you would see that this school would receive a 99 and this school would receive a 91. Now, our assertion is actually that neither school is better or worse. And we want to get away from a department as making statements about better and worse. We want to make statements about different. Both of these schools have achieved a very high level of academic success, but they have done it in 2 different ways. Those 2 ways may be very important to the individual community in which those schools are in. So we do not want to be in the business of telling the world that high school 1 did it a better way than high school 2. So the new federal legislation around reporting, which you've heard of called ESSA, the shorthand for the Every Student Succeeds Act, okay, allows for us as a state to present our state report card in a dashboard approach. A dashboard will not roll each individual indicator into a math formula. It will let each indicator stand alone and be compared to itself in performance. So it will present the actual school performance without aggregating into a single score. It treats the accountability system as a tool for continuous improvement. Because we're going to break these things down into subgroup information, it's going to give school leaders a lot better opportunity to make decisions about the data, because they'll have more data to look at as opposed to an overall score for their entire student body. It's going to maximize transparency. As you see, you're going to get a lot more information than just a number or just the categories that were previously included in SPP. And it's going to keep dissimilar measures distinct. Thus, you can avoid some of the weighting issues that we talked about, and a really good performance and a really poor performance will not just categorize your school as average and offset. You'll be allowed to celebrate the achievements of the school and look at the room for improvement as you talk about, the educational program and the educational opportunities that that school is providing for your students and your neighbors. So I've done a lot of talking about the difference in indicators. The next 3 slides will show what the index measures for each school. Again, state assessment measures are now reduced to about 33% of the equation, as opposed to formerly about 80 to 85. Again, each one of these categories will remain distinct. So the department will take the stance that state assessment measures, on-track measures, and career readiness measures are all equally important in producing a well-rounded, ready for the workforce, ready for success graduate. The state assessment measures that will be measured on the index include the percent proficient and advanced on state testing. And you can see that some of these are marked with my attempt at art there, a little American flag icon. Those indicators are through ESSA legislation and through our consolidated plan that the state must submit to meet that legislation. Those indicators are required by the federal government, and those are the federal indicators on which schools will be measured if they are determined as support schools. The indicators that are not marked with a flag icon here represent indicators that the state has added and are giving to parents and community members and to school leaders and to teachers and to students as extra information for context, so that schools have a better idea why they are scoring the way they're scoring on these federal indicators. So the percent proficient and advanced on state testing remains. It's just reduced in weight. Meeting annual growth expectations remains. It's just reduced in weight. And the state is going to aggregate out the percent of students that are actually advanced, not just proficient and advanced, because there is a measure of success in that if, for example, 80% of the students are proficient or advanced on a test, there is a difference between a school that has 20% proficient and 60% of those kids advanced versus 60% proficient and 20% advanced. In other words, it's not just across the line anymore. It's how far across that threshold you're taking the kids and how well they are set up for success in the future. The second category of indicators is completely new. While state assessments have been around for a while and we are required to use them in trying to offset those and trying to get this well-rounded whole child look, we are going to look at English language proficiency, So this is for non-native speakers of the language and how well they achieve proficiency in the schools, which we know is important. Chronic absenteeism, which we believe is an on-track indicator, because if students miss a high percentage of their seat time, it is reason to believe that that student will have difficulty in achieving academic measures that would ensure success for that student. And we're going to measure grade 3 reading and grade 7 mathematics early indicators of success. And the reason, this is a state initiative, not a federal one, the reason we're looking at that, we know through a lot of research that students who attain good, solid literacy skills in early education and students who attain algebra skills before entrance into high school both perform much better academically than students who do not. The last set of indicators are college and career measures. We've done a good job in the past of talking about what's going on in a school as it's happening, but we haven't really before graded the output of the school beyond the graduation and beyond the testing windows. So we're going to look at the graduation rate of the school. We're going to look at the career standards benchmark, which is a measure of students' active engagement in lessons, at least 20 lessons from K to 12, that prepare that student for work and cover the career and work education standards that were board approved in 2006. We've had these programs in place, and we know from visiting schools that some schools have done some really phenomenal things with career preparation. To this point, they just weren't measured. So we want to measure the good things that the schools are doing to prepare our students for the workforce, even if that is after 2 years of technical school, after a military enlistment, after 4 or 6 years of post-secondary education, or if it's right after graduation with a student prepared to join the workforce right away. We also want to measure for schools industry-based learning opportunities. Students who have the ability to gain a industry-recognized credential or a work-based learning experience like an internship or a co-op or a job shadow while they are in high school. We want to measure courses of rigor, things like AP and IB classes, college courses that are offered in the high school, dual enrollment, and we're going to look at students who excel in articulated courses of study within VOTEC programs as well, technical education programs, because there are rigorous courses that are not necessarily in the core academics that are just as beneficial in preparing a student for postgraduate success. We're also going to look at a post-secondary transition to school, military, or work, where we will be able to inform communities on the number of students who are moving into those particular pathways 16 months after their graduation. So if we're not going to prepare an overall score for a school, what are we going to display so that you as parents and you as community members and you as leaders out there in the community are going to have the information you need to make good decisions and to push your school programmatically and to have the good discussions. We're going to present the school's performance on each indicator. So each one of those indicators, we would report the percentage of students who are achieving that goal. We're also going to present the statewide average. The statewide average will not be involved in the scoring of your school. It is there as a contextual bit of information and for comparison purposes. The reason that is, there are some indicators where, an academic indicator, obviously a high percentage of performance in the 80s or 90s is a very good mark. There may be, though, a situation, a school, a conventional high school in which 15% of the students engage in a work-based learning activity. That's actually a very good percentage, even though 15 seems like somewhat of a low number. The inverse of that would be if that were a career and technical center, 15 would be very low compared to what we would expect. So the statewide average for your particular building configuration gives context to the percentages so that folks know exactly what is a good performance and can judge what an expectation and a reasonable expectation of your school might be. We're also going to list the statewide goal. Each of these indicators under ESSA have a 2030 statewide goal because ESSA is a 13-year plan, so that this year's kindergartners, it will track this year's kindergartners through their graduation. And there are interim goals for each year and an overall goal for the state that will kind of track the progress and be comparative of that school to measure their success against other schools in the Commonwealth. Inside of each indicator, schools will receive a progress designation. The first of those is blue, and then we would color code, and when you see the screenshots, this will probably make a little more sense to you, but it's only 3 categories that I'd like you to keep in mind until Alan is able to go through the screenshots with you. A school that is blue or would receive the highest rating meets or exceeds the statewide goal. So if you already next year have met or surpassed that 2030 goal, and there will be schools in some indicators that do right out of the gates because they're very high performing in that particular indicator, that group would receive a blue rating in that indicator. There's a green rating. A green rating means one of 2 things. Either the school has met the interim target, so remember that besides the 2030 goal, there are evenly spaced intervals that your school would achieve to get there. So you may not have exceeded that 2030 designation right off the bat, but you have exceeded what 1 year's worth of progress should be toward that 2030 goal. That would get you a green designation or coding in the rating system. There's also a percent improvement target. And if you have made a significant improvement, even though you may have missed the target because early on, what we don't want to do is doom a school that early on has a certain baseline to never making improvements based on this 2030 goal. So a school that makes significant improvement that may not have reached the overall target, but has made enough that it would surpass one of those goals at the trajectory it's growing, that school would also meet a green rating. One of the things that we'll probably ask you as we thumb through the screenshots is if green for both of those is the best way to display it, or if we would want to differentiate those with 2 different colors. And there's some reasons we might want to do both, but obviously the opinion of our stakeholders will be the determiner in how we decide to do that. And then a red rating is a school that in that particular indicator met neither the statewide goal nor showed improvement in that area. So at this point, I think I've described our purpose enough, well enough for you that as Alan goes through the screenshots, if you keep some of that in the back of your mind, you can see how well we have visualized what we have set out to do with the screen skills. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alan Muir from PLS Third Learning, who's our lead in the technical and web design, and he's going to go through actual screenshots at this point of the index.
Thank you, Brian. This first screenshot is the screenshot of the landing page for the Future Ready PA Index. We want the site to be user-friendly, and as Brian indicated, your feedback is very important to make sure that we meet that expectation. You'll notice the site's landing page has a brief description of the Future Ready PA Index, and then there are tools that can be used to locate schools. The first tool would be search by school name. So you could start to type in the school name, and it has what's called Smart Search. So once you put a couple of letters in there, then a list of schools that would have those letters would appear. You can search for schools using a map view. So there'll be a map of Pennsylvania. The map will be broken into counties, and then the counties will be broken into school districts. So you can locate a school based on a county location, and once you determine what school district you're interested in, then the schools themselves for that district will appear. When you're answering some of the questions in the SurveyMonkey, one of the questions actually pertains to the search features, and we specifically would like you to talk a little bit about the map feature and how you might use that, or anything that you might want to include in being able to search through a map. The third tool allows you to search schools by county, district, or if it's a career tech center, search by the career tech centers. So you can visualize a drop-down menu where you would have counties. You would click on a county, and then the schools would appear through the county, very similar to the way I described the map. You would have a list of all the school districts for the drop-down menu. You would pick the school district you're looking for, and then that would list the schools. The fourth one is the cyber and cyber charter schools. So we have that as a separate category. So if you're interested in looking at one of those types of schools, then that's a tool that you can use. You'll notice underneath the search by name, there is more search options. The more search options will provide you with ways to search for schools based on school enrollment, based on the location of the school with respect to your zip code, based on demographics, ethnicity, English language learners, students with disabilities, things like that. At the bottom of the page, you'll see a glossary. You'll see where there can be information called guidance documents and other sorts of information that'll help kind of explain what's going on with the site. As you hover over information that's on the site, you will also see, we won't see these in the still shots, but when the site's actually up, you'll see information about the words that are on the site. So there'll be like definitions and explanations for how some of the values have been calculated. So this next screen is actually, you see that we typed in a couple of letters, and then you can see through the Smart Search that these were some of the schools that populated based on those letters. You'll notice that there are 16 pages. So the more letters that you put in, based on the name of the school, obviously the less choices you have. But if you're not quite sure how to spell the school, or you only know a couple of the letters, this is one of the choices that you can use. This particular screen shows the other way to search for schools. So you can see the grades, you can see the enrollment, you could see how you could search based on your zip code, and then how close you would want to be to your zip code. We have some possibilities based on affiliations with IUs, affiliations with the patent offices. You can see the demographics, which would be your race, your ethnicities, and your races, as well as your English language learners, your students with disabilities, and the economically disadvantaged. There are also possibly some ways that you could search through some of the actual measures, like percent proficient or advanced. So we would have some ranges on there, maybe schools that were from 90 to 100%, or maybe schools that were from 70 to 80%. So those are some of the advanced ways to search for schools. So again, this will be very important when you're answering that question about the search feature, just to provide some of the feedback about some of these different tools and how you view them. So let's pretend that we selected a school, and we go to the school performance landing page. Now, at the top of the page, you'll see the name of the school, and then to the right, there'll be school designations. A school can be a CSI school, okay? It can be a TSI, or it could be a top school, and then we have a large group of schools that would kind of be in the middle. And I'll let Brian talk a little bit more about that in a second. When you go to the middle of the page, then you can see the different indicators, the state assessment measures that Brian talked about, the on-track measures, the college and career measures. And what's showing up on this page would be the indicators that are linked to the federal accountability. So underneath state assessment measures, you can see that we have mathematics, we have ELA, we have the growth with mathematics, there would be the growth with ELA also. And then you see the rating code that Brian was talking about with the blue, the green, and then the red. So I'll pause here and let Brian talk about anything on this page that might provide some more clarity.
Sure, thanks, Alan. The four designations, remember that this is both a state report card, but it is the federal reporting for ESSA. And we talked about those measures that were marked with the American flag icon. Those were the six indicators through either the ESSA legislation or through the Pennsylvania Consolidated Plan on which schools would receive a designation. The lowest 5% performers in an indicator would receive comprehensive support designation. The lowest 5% in a subgroup in an indicator, so if most of the students were achieving, but there was one subgroup that registered in the lowest 5%, that group would be called targeted support and intervention. Targeted is sort of a watch list designation in that you have to be aware that there's an area in which you should improve to not fall into the lowest 5% performers. Then the highest 5% performers in those indicators would also be labeled, and we haven't actually come up with the exact wording for that labeling, but that labeling would then encompass the highest 5% performers on those six indicators.
So as we continue to look at this page, below each of the cells that have the state measures, you see view all state measures, view all on-track measures, or view all college and career measures. So you would click on one of those depending on which one you want to look at. Let's pretend that we clicked on the view state measures, and what you would see then would be, in this case, the percent proficient or advanced on the Pennsylvania state assessments. So we have mathematics, we have science, and then we have English language arts. Now, because mathematics and English language arts both have federal accountability, they have colors associated with the top part of the cell. The top part of the cell gives you information about the all student group. And you can see the federal indicator notation for both mathematics and the English language arts that lets you know that has federal accountability. Okay, science does not have federal accountability, so we still have information about percent proficient or advanced in the statewide average, but we don't have a color code there. It would be a neutral gray to let you know that that's not federal accountability and there's no scoring with that. If we were to continue to scroll down, we would see the growth expectations, and then as Brian said, we would be able to see the advanced scoring for both mathematics, well, for all three, mathematics, science, and English language arts. At the bottom of each cell for the mathematics or the science or the English language arts, you see view student group breakdown. So let's click on the view student group breakdown, and what we see would be the student group breakdown for the ethnicities and races, and then economically disadvantaged, English learner, and students with disabilities. You see the performance percentage for each of the subgroups, and then you see a scoring for mathematics in this case, because mathematics is a federal accountability measure. The blue, as Brian said before, would indicate that you have exceeded or met the state goal. Okay, the green has the two characteristics of you're either basically on track for meeting that goal, or your improvement from one year to the next is very significant. And then the red meaning that you're not on that track that we're looking for. So this is another page that we're interested in getting some feedback from the audience about, what kind of information this provides, and does it provide good information? Brian, anything you'd like to add to this?
No, I think that is a good summary, and that's exactly what we are trying to represent. And again, is the 3 designations what we want to see? Should there be some designation difference in the 2 ways to achieve the middle group? Some different questions like that, and just how the display is, helpful to you making decisions and assessing the performance of a school.
So if we go back to the school landing page, right underneath the school name, you saw a tab called School Performance. We just took a look at the pages that would be associated with the school performance. Now we'll take a look at the page that would be associated with the school fast facts. So we see information on this still shot of school fast facts that would be associated with the school. You can see bar graphs for percent enrollment by student groups. You see bar graphs for test participation rates for mathematics, science, English language arts. You see information about grades offered. You see a map for a location of the school. You see the phone number. You also see a circle graph that shows you information about percent enrollment by race and ethnicity. This is the part of the page, that circle graph, that we'd like you to comment on, just how it looks and how it feels, and does that provide the information that we're looking for. At the bottom, you see you could access the school safety report, you could access special education data report, and you could go to a state audit that would provide some fiscal information as well. The other tab on the school performance page is the district fast facts. If we go to the district fast facts, you can see that it's very similar to what the school fast facts look like. The one major difference is there is fiscal information here. There's a possibility that we might have some fiscal information for the school page as well. But again, look at the 2 fast fact pages and provide us some feedback on those, as far as the design, the way the information is laid out, and how it's presented, and are you able to glean what you're looking for from it. Brian, anything about the fast facts?
No, I think we covered that. We covered that well.
So that takes us to the end of this presentation. This is the link for SurveyMonkey. There are 6 questions on SurveyMonkey, and then there's a space where you can type in your information. And like Brian said, the questions pertain to the design, the layout, what the information looks like. The last question allows you to post any comments or concerns or any questions. Your feedback is desired and appreciated, and we really appreciate, like Brian said, the time that you gave to us tonight. Brian, I'll pass it back to you for closing comments.
Yeah, and we do very much appreciate your participation and your leadership and your interest in what's a very, very important initiative for the state. We are going to, through the messaging feature on this webinar and the Zoom program, we're going to send that link out too, if you'd like to cut and paste it into your browser, so you don't have to memorize that or type that if you don't want to, or things like that. And it may even come out as a hot link because it looks like it's blue and underlined. But if not, we can cut and paste into your browser and go to the site that way. And we do hope, we did try to design this so that it didn't take up an inordinate amount of your time, but that it got to the things that we wanted to ask about and get your information for. And I do want to assure you, the one thing I want to assure you is that this is not, this is not perfunctory. This is not a lip service kind of thing. We received over 3,000 comments on the ESSA plan, and inside the plan we documented how we used those, and we did use that feedback in formulating the plan. There are decisions that we will make pretty much solely based on the community feedback and the feedback from educators that we get through this stakeholder engagement process. And again, this is the first of several. We have 3 lined up for some parent and community groups before we go out to the educational world. So we do want you to know that we're taking this seriously, and this is we really appreciate your effort, and we really are going to look at this information to help make this the best possible tool for you and for your students and for your community, because that's really been the goal all along since day one. So at this time, we will leave that link up for you, and that link in the chat box. As long as you would like to stay signed on, you may. You can take that link then and go into your browser and make any comments you feel necessary, and you want to give us any feedback, we appreciate and we'll definitely consider. So I want to thank you for your participation and your time and your dedication, and hopefully we've given you enough information to make some good decisions about where we're headed with this tool. So thank you, and we appreciate all your hard work.